Underachieving in F1 is bad enough for any team without being on the receiving end of a public blasting from your CEO as well. Alpine has been attacked by its own chief executive in a pretty astonishing way, even by F1 standards, with some aspects of the team labelled amateurish and consequences already being threatened. So what's prompted this aggressive outburst? Does it have any merit? And what's it actually meant to achieve? If you followed our coverage of Alpine's car launch earlier this year, you'll know that the team set quite an aggressive target for this season. After finishing 4th last year and reinstating itself as a supposed best of the rest behind Red Bull, Ferrari and Mercedes, Alpine aimed to repeat the feat this year, but with a key difference. It wanted to finish closer to the top 3 than it was to 5th. That has proven to be even more over-optimistic than it sounded for a team that has repeatedly failed to make significant progress since Renault's works team returned in 2016. Not only has Alpine been leapfrogged like a lot of teams by Aston Martin, it has also chronically underachieved over the first 5 races in a frustratingly wasteful start to the season. The 4 weekends that preceded the team's public dressing down tended to go one of 3 ways. Alpine has either lacked pace, lacked execution, or lacked both pace and execution. It's not been pretty. In Bahrain, Alpine had one car knocked out in Q1 in qualifying, while the other suffered 3 penalties in the race the next day. Saudi Arabia was more solid, even if the team was only a muted 5th fastest, as it got both cars into the lower reaches of the top 10. Then Australia brought both a new high and a new low, as Alpine was much more in the mix with both Mercedes and Ferrari, especially on race pace, only for its 2 cars to collide at the end of the Grand Prix in disastrous fashion. If that was bad, Azerbaijan was probably even worse. Both cars had reliability problems in the only free practice session before Friday qualifying, leaving the team with barely a handful of flying laps complete before locking in its setup for the rest of the event. Pierre Gasly then crashed in qualifying, while Esteban Ocon's weekend went from bad to worse as Alpine realised the car was running too low and was in danger of illegally wearing the plank underneath, so it changed his setup and forced him to start from the pit lane in both the sprint and the Grand Prix. From there, neither car had meaningful pace, as the various compromises meant the A523 was just plain uncompetitive. All of that left Alpine heading to Miami only 6th in the championship with just 8 points from 4 races. It was crystal clear that Alpine needed to do better, and in the middle of the 5th round of the season, CEO Laurent Rossi decided not only to make the team aware of it, but to let everybody else know at the same time. Rossi seemed to go rogue over the Miami Grand Prix weekend with an interview with French broadcaster Canal+, then proved his comments were not just a heat of the moment thing by going even further in an interview with F1's official website. In a scathing review of Alpine's season so far, Rossi laid into the performance of its car and the team's operations over race weekends. He claimed the job Alpine was doing was not worthy of the resource invested and said the team is very far from its objective for the season. Most painfully, even to those of us who weren't on the receiving end of it, Rossi declared that the calamitous opening race in Bahrain was beset by dilettantism, or amateurishness. Azerbaijan conjured up the same image, he said, which made Rossi particularly angry. While he wants Alpine to be unafraid of making mistakes, he claimed this was proof of making the same ones twice, accusing the team of not learning or taking responsibility, which he called unacceptable. All of this gave the impression that heads could roll soon at Alpine, although it was a little bit vague. But this was just the first interview, there was still more to come. In his F1 interview, Rossi outright threatened consequences if Alpine's underachievement is not met with the right response. He was asked directly about team principal Otmar Szafnauer's position within the team and the responsibility he has to take, and Rossi implied the answer is basically all of it. Rossi called it Otmar's mission to turn the team around and said there is no hiding, and hinted that trust in his ability to lead would be eroded if Alpine didn't improve quickly. Rossi has also refused to adjust the team's target for 2023, saying he will not give people the comfort of making it easier to achieve, so therefore it will be a failure if Alpine does not finish 4th this year. That looks extremely unlikely at this stage, with Alpine currently 64 points adrift of 4th place. And the fact is, Aston Martin's leap has made it immeasurably harder to finish higher than 5th. At this rate, Alpine might even struggle to beat McLaren, who are doing their own version of being utterly underwhelming. Rossi believes that Alpine has everything it needs to do what Aston Martin has done. He might need to look a bit more closely if he thinks that Alpine, which is still in the process of upgrading elements of its Enstone factory, really has much superior infrastructure to its midfield rivals, even if it is a works team. It's debatable whether Renault has really given the team enough support to demand a greater level of success. Aston Martin is, after all, still investing heavily and has been on the kind of recruitment drive most teams, including Alpine, could only dream of. The current success there, being led by former Alpine driver Fernando Alonso, hasn't happened by accident. Still, Alpine can do better than it is right now, and there was a glimmer of hope for the team in that Rossi said he will tolerate the failure if it happens after he sees 500% effort, as he will consider that a sign of better things to come. But if not, he said there will be consequences and he will not wait until the end of the year to take action. In fairness, Rossi's comments at least accurately reflect the situation. Alpine has done a bad job this season. And it has been noted in the paddock that not only is Alpine really quite far from being a slick F1 team, but Zafnauer has looked a little disengaged about the whole thing all season. Maybe Alpine and the team's senior personnel needed a fire under their backsides, but even if that's true, there's still a caveat. Does that really call for labelling them amateurish on TV and twisting the knife in interviews? A more rational approach might be to consider that there have been some specific circumstances and seeing where the next few races go as the season settles down. Especially when, with all due respect to Rossi's business and engineering background, he knows little about running an F1 team and is viewing it from afar. Given it was Rossi who hired Zafnauer, it's a bit strange to hear him putting all the responsibility on Otmar. Alpine's trackside operations errors are clearly not the direct fault of the team boss, and the underlying performance deficit has existed for years. Addressing those issues falls within Zafnauer's remit, absolutely, but to think that Renault's chronically underperforming works team would be fixed within 12 months of a new team boss arriving is massively naive. Rossi talks and acts like a part-time F1 boss. He dips in from time to interfere or cast judgment, wielding power and influence when it suits him, but abdicating responsibility for anything that goes wrong. The way he talked about the issue being addressed sums up the situation perfectly. Rossi said he needs to tackle the problem, but then said he needs the right people to tackle it because it's not up to him. He expressed hope they would make the same diagnosis, then said he would make it clear to them what the diagnosis is. So which is it? Is this Rossi's responsibility as CEO, or is it the team's? If it's Rossi's, why is he free from any blame? If it's the team's, why is he piling in and lumping on pressure instead of giving them the time and space to address the faults as they arise? If Rossi thought this would be a motivational exercise, he's misjudged it. There was a clear feeling in Miami that the comments had gone down like a lead balloon, so you can imagine how people in the team felt when another interview emerged a day later. One senior figure within Alpine said the team is best left alone. Another comment was that Zafnauer's only kind of in charge. He can make recommendations to those above him, but that's it. It's also been said to us that to some inside the team, Alpine feels like it's just a marketing exercise with a race team attached. Interference from people who think they have more understanding or expertise than they do, and say or do things that compromise the effort of the people that actually know what they're doing, is really damaging. Long-term projects, which Alpine's 100-race plan to be an F1 frontrunner is supposed to be, need patience. There have been deep-rooted issues to solve in this team for many years. The process of doing that is bound to have setbacks. Do we think there are serious doubts over whether Renault's works team can ever get to where it wants to? Yes, but as impartial observers, voicing that doubt is hardly controversial, and even we wouldn't scorch as much earth as Rossi did to point that out. For the CEO to unleash 2 rounds of verbal ammunition on his own troops feels like an entirely self-defeating move.